we're looking at pharmaceutical compounds and antibiotic compounds, and our study involves locations on surface water sites, that is streams, upstream and downstream from agricultural operations, another 6 streams upstream and downstream from municipal wastewater treatment plants, and another 6 locations where we're looking at groundwater in agricultural areas. So we've got a list of about 17 pharmaceutical compounds that we're analyzing for. These include some of the common compounds like codeine, which is in all your cough medicines. If you've got Robitussin on your shelf at home, it's probably got some codeine in it. A few compounds like that. Also some tracer compounds like caffeine. And for the antibiotics, that's a more exhaustive list. We've got 31 compounds we're analyzing for there, including some of the common ones, although not including some of the things like amoxicillin and penicillin. Those compounds break down very rapidly in the environment. We just never find them in natural setting. So those are not part of our target compounds, but we're still looking at 31 commonly used antibiotics. So far, we've got a lot of data back, not completely all the data back, but a lot of data back from the study. And for the agricultural areas, we're finding very few of these compounds in surface water sites in agricultural settings. Now, we know that the farmers are using antibiotics in particular for their livestock. They're feeding them feed with antibiotics. They're injecting antibiotics, but we're not finding them in the surface water sites, except at a very low numbers of sites. Also, we're not finding them at all in the groundwater in the agricultural settings. This is a little bit of a surprise because we know the farmers are using these antibiotics. Why aren't we finding them? Well, maybe the antibiotics are being sorbed into the soils and sediment in the ground. Maybe we're looking down, not up gradient in the groundwater from where these pharmaceuticals are being used. Maybe we're looking at the wrong farms, not sure, but we expected to find them. We're not finding them. That's pretty good news. The story for the surface water sites where there's wastewater treatment plants, that's a little bit different story. Upstream from the wastewater treatment plants, we're finding little or none of these compounds. Downstream, we're finding a large number of these compounds, although at low concentrations. So it seems pretty obvious that the source of most of these compounds in the environment is the wastewater treatment plant. Not too big of a surprise because people are taking these compounds, the pharmaceuticals, people are using the antibiotics, they're flushing the antibiotics that they didn't use down the toilet, and then winding up in the wastewater treatment plant. The wastewater treatment plant is not removing all these compounds. Wastewater treatment plants were designed primarily for carbonaceous material, waste, organic waste. So they weren't really designed to remove pharmaceuticals or antibiotic compounds. They could remove those with granular activated carbon filtration, but indeed most wastewater treatment plants do not have that step, and it's very expensive. So we're finding these compounds in waters, particularly downstream from wastewater treatment plants. What does that mean? We really don't know. There's evidence to show, however, that these compounds cause what we call gender bender effects in fish. One of my colleagues in the USGS biological discipline in West Virginia has done some extensive studies in the Potomac River Basin, and she has found fish, male fish in the Potomac River drainage that are producing eggs. In other words, they're taking on female sexual characteristics even though they're male fish. What does this do to the population? I think probably it doesn't take too long to figure out that these population of fish are headed toward extinction if this kind of a trend continues. Also, we're working with another USGS researcher in Michigan to look at antibiotic resistance. We know these antibiotic compounds are in the water. What's happening to the bacteria as they're exposed long-term to these low levels of antibiotics? Well, Dr. Lisa Fogarty in Michigan is taking water from our samples, taking it back to her lab, culturing bacteria out of that water, and testing those bacteria for antibiotic resistance. Well, we don't have the results of Lisa's work yet, but we will have before long, and then we'll know whether or not the bacteria are actually developing resistance to these antibiotic compounds. If the bacteria are developing that resistance, Then what we need to do is look for new drugs, new antibiotic compounds that will be effective on these bacteria. Antibiotic-resistant strains of bacteria have been found in other locations. We don't know if they're here. Our pilot study will help us figure that out. This is expensive work, but DEP, who's the cooperator on this project, has agreed to go to a second phase. And during that phase, we're going to look most extensively at drinking water intakes that are serving as public water supplies, and also at finished drinking water. We want to know, are these compounds in the water that's coming into the water treatment plant? And we also want to know, are these compounds being removed by the treatment process at the water treatment plant? We know that these compounds are out there. We don't really know what the effect of them are at this point.